So Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and happy Women's Day. So we begin this week the fifth book of the Torah, Parshat Devarim, the book of Devarim, the book of words, also known as Deuteronomy. The second Torah. Why is it called the second Torah? The Greek translation and hence in English, because it's portrayed as Moshe's last sermons, 3 sermons to the children of Israel. They're on the borders of the land, the promised land. Moshe has been told already by God that he's not going to enter the land. He has to hand over succession to Yoshua ben Nun. But he decides before he leaves his people to remind them of the journey through the wilderness from Egypt until when they reach the promised land. To caution them that once they enter the land, they must observe God's laws. And to remind them that if they stray, God will always take them back if they return to God. And so it's called the second telling. And in the second telling, this week's parasha, he reminds them of the incident of the 12 spies. So we read that incident first in the book of Numbers, where Moshe sends out 12 spies, a man from each of the tribes, to reconnoiter the land, from north to south, east to west. They come back, the Israelites are waiting on the other side of the Jordan at a place called Kadesh. And 10 of the spies say to Moshe that while the land is indeed a land flowing with milk and honey, the people there, the inhabitants, are too powerful for us to conquer them. We can't go into the land. 2 of the spies, Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb ben Yefuneh, Caleb the son of Yefuneh, disagree with the other 10 and say that if we have enough belief in God, enough belief in ourselves, we can overcome the inhabitants, we can rise to the challenge. The Israelites choose to follow the 10 negative reports because we as people like to wallow in misery. And so they complain to Moses and say, why are you going to lead us into this land? You're going to die, we're going to perish. We're not going to go in. This was a year after they left Egypt. So God decrees that the Israelites should wander in the wilderness for another 39 years, making a total of 40 years, until a new generation comes to the fore who have enough self-belief to enter the land. On hearing this, the Israelites, some of them decide to go into the land to try to prevent this wandering for another 39 years. And Moses warns them that God's not going to be with them. And indeed, they perish in the attempt to cross into the river, into the promised land. And so the Israelites have to wander for another 40 years. So this week's Torah portion, Moshe reminds them of that fact. Interestingly, Joshua, the son of Nun, of course, takes over from Moses. What happens to Caleb ben Yefuneh? Well, he, like Joshua, was the only 2 men from that generation that entered the land of Israel 39 years later. In the book of Chronicles appears another Caleb ben Chetzron, and says that he married a woman by the name of Azuvah, and she gave birth to a few sons. The rabbis in the Talmud say that this Caleb ben Chetzron is the same person as Caleb ben Yefuneh. So how come in the Torah his father's name is Yefuneh, but in Chronicles his name is Chetzron? Well, the rabbis say Chetzron and Yefuneh are one and the same person. Why was he called son of Yefuneh? Because he turned away from the negative spies towards God. So that's why it's called Yefuneh. But it's one and the same person. And what happened to him? According to the rabbis, he ends up marrying Miriam. Miriam, Moses' sister. Miriam Hanavi'ah. Miriam the prophetess. She's named the prophetess in the Torah. And why then in Chronicles is his name of his wife Azuvah? From the word la'azov, to leave. The rabbis say that many men didn't want to have a relationship with her, didn't want to engage with her, because she was too plain looking. But Caleb saw through that, saw into her inner soul, saw the beauty, her inner beauty, and so he married her. So she's called Azuvah in Chronicles, but actually she was Miriam, and that's what the rabbis like to do. So Miriam, we know, was a prophetess because the Torah tells us that she was. And she looked after Moshe when he was a baby in a reed basket. According to the Midrash, she convinced her father Amram to marry his wife Yocheved and to have a child who she knew would, according to the rabbis, would be the future liberator of the people, the Hebrews in Egypt. So that's why she's known as a prophetess. She could see into what would happen. If it wasn't for Miriam, Moshe wouldn't have survived. If it wasn't for Miriam, Moshe would have been lost to the Hebrew people because, of course, Pharaoh's daughter sees him, takes him, wants to adopt him. And Miriam says, well, I've got a wet nurse for you. And it happens to be Yocheved, Moshe's biological mom. And so he's raised in a Hebrew home, so he knows his identity. And therefore, he's the right person to become the liberator of our ancestors. Miriam plays a prominent part in the leadership role, as a leadership role in the wilderness. And indeed, according to the rabbis, she merits having a well of water follow the Israelites throughout their wanderings. And she dies as well, dries up. The rabbis say that there were another 6 prophetesses mentioned in the Tanakh. Sarah, Miriam herself, Devorah, Hannah, so we had a Hannah here, Abigail, Huldah, and Esther were all prophetesses, say the rabbis. Very, very important women in our history. Without them, our history would be very, very different. As you celebrate Women's Day today and Women's Month this month, you look in our tradition, in our source texts, you find these very prominent women who play important roles. But there are also other women who weren't esteemed and high esteemed as these 7, but who played important roles in the life and history of the Jewish people. Shifra and Puah were 2 midwives. We read about them in the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus. They were ordered by Pharaoh to kill all Hebrew baby boys that were born. But they chose to defy Pharaoh's orders. And they made sure that all children lived. And Pharaoh called them and said, why didn't you heed my commandment, my order, to kill the baby boys born to the Hebrew women? And they fibbed and they said, well, you know, the Hebrew women are so hardy that when you arrive at the birthing stool, the baby's already born and taken away, so you couldn't do anything. They stood up to Pharaoh, these midwives. The incident of the golden calf in the wilderness. The rabbis teach us that while the men were worshipping this golden calf, the women didn't take part in it at all. And so they merited that their mirrors be used to decorate the altar of incense in the tabernacle. So these were ordinary women who were strong enough to resist the temptation to stray from God, who were strong enough to stand up to Pharaoh. So we celebrate all the women in our lives this month. And therefore we have at our Seder table a cup of Miriam. We drink a cup, a l'chaim, to all the women. So whether you are a prophetess or a queen, or just a career woman, a wife, a daughter, a mother, we celebrate you this month. And we need to realize that without the women in our history, Judaism wouldn't be the same, and maybe Judaism wouldn't have survived. So, Yeshua Koach to all our women, and I think we learn from this parasha that all people are important, no matter what the gender or the ethnicity. And so, I wish you all Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I'm going to read a prayer for the hostages.